Congress is once again engaged in their version of political chicken. That is, trying to fund the government. Now, most of you should be aware that the government is funded, their fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th of each year, overlapping the New Year's. And so you would think that by the end of September, they would have a budget done, an appropriations bill passed, and the government would be funded. But unfortunately, that's never happening anymore. We go with continuing resolutions. Now, what a continuing resolution is, it's an arcane little deal that Congress works out where they continue to fund the government, so it doesn't shut down, at the previous year's funding levels. Now, the problem with that is that everything is set in stone from the previous year, and so if you have to make changes in how the spending should be allocated in a year where things have changed and circumstances are different, you really can't do it because you're bound by the previous law and the previous numbers in each allocation. And so Congress goes through this charade of passing continuing resolutions, extending the government funding for a couple of months or a couple of weeks over and over and over. So we're up against the wall again. The current continuing resolution expires on February 18th, and appropriators are back to work trying to come up with an agreement. Now, the big sticking point is that how much do you spend on defense and how much on domestic spending? The Biden budget proposes a 1.7% increase in defense spending. And you know what, to be honest, I could live with that, but they want a almost 16% increase in domestic spending. Now that's a little bit out of whack. And that means that becomes the baseline in future agreements. So let's look at this and see how does that affect our lives. That 16% increase in domestic spending has a major impact on inflation and social programs and other things that cause money to be just run amok in our society. So the top two negotiators in the Senate are Richard Shelby and Patrick Leahy, a Republican and a Democrat. They've been around combined 80-some years. They're all both retiring at the end of this year, so they want to get a deal. But nobody talks about doing what they should do, and that is have each appropriations committee pass a bill after they've held hearings, bring that bill to the floor, and vote on it. Instead, we do the CRs, and then when we finally run out of time, when the chickens come home to roost as they played chicken throughout all this, they will pass what's known as an omnibus bill. They will put all of it into one big bill and say, take it or leave it. Instead of passing individual bills for defense, individual bills for commerce, individual bills for health and human services, they put it all in one and say, here it is. You either take it or you don't. And so what I hope we see happen in the midterms, I see a parallel to back in the late 90s, and I spoke about this last week. If Republicans take control of both the House and Senate, and every voter should think about this, it would force Joe Biden to pivot and become a negotiator. And in the 90s, when Republicans took the House and Senate and Clinton was president, we actually had surpluses. We didn't deficit spend. We forced people to live within their means. And maybe we have a chance of doing that. I'm not hopeful because some of the Republicans in Congress act like Democrats when it comes to spending. It's the age-old thing about, you look at spending a bill and people say, well, that congressman, he's taking home pork. My guy brings home the bacon. So if it's coming to my district, it's okay. When it's going somewhere else, well, that's pork and we need to cut that. So we're playing this game of chicken. It ends on February 18th, and they're trying to get a 3-week extension of a continuing resolution to keep the government open. Now, why do they want 3 weeks? Well, they'll tell you that it's so they can have more time to negotiate, and we have till March 11th. But in the back of their mind, they also know that way the House can take their President's Day recess of 1 week, and they can go home and campaign and do a glad hand and meet constituents, and they don't have to stay in Washington and hammer out an agreement. Now, they'll tell you that, staff are doing this, and if staff are doing it, then why do we need members? Bottom line is, Congress ought to stay in session, pass individual bills, take them to the floor, and pass them individually. Quit doing omnibus bills, just like this reconciliation bill is a massive package, take it or leave it. That's not how government was meant to operate, but that's how we let it become. So if you're tired of it, call your congressman, call your senator, tell them, hey, pass the individual bills, go back to regular order and do it right. And if you can't do it, maybe we ought to find somebody that can. This is To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.